Hello everyone, I'm Rich Lewis. This is another episode of You've Only Come to Hear United. And after a long international break, it's actually one about Premier League football, which makes a very refreshing change. So we're going to have a little look at the player ratings today, and we're going to have a little look at maybe what caused us a few problems in the game, having a little bit of a look at the new system and how that panned out, and then having a little bit of a look ahead to the game against Bodo Glimt as well. So we're going to jump straight into the player ratings off the bat. And first of all, great place to start is with the goalkeeper today. Andre Onana, I've gone with an 8. I think it was getting closer to borderline 9. I think sometimes for me with a goalkeeper though, if you want to have, like a penalty save in there or something when you're getting to the 9s and above, or maybe a few more super saves. But maybe those 2 saves today were worthy of that. Let me know in the comments. Onana, he's been really good this season. He's been really solid. I think there's been a couple of moments, but you get that with all keepers. Generally he's on a different level to last season, where it felt like he was costing us game after game after game at different points. And I think he's really settled down. I enjoy watching him as a goalkeeper. I think he probably will get caught out every now and again with the way we look like we may play out from the back going forwards. As we saw in the early stages, definitely against Ipswich, we were prepared to take more risks than I've seen us take under Erik ten Hag, or at least since the early days of Erik ten Hag. So there were a few nervy moments in there, but 2 huge saves from Onana. His first, that big Peter Schmeichel-esque block, was sensational. And again, thwarting Delap from that little back flick that Delap had, and making another really, really top stop. Can't fault him at all. He was our man of the match under Onana. Not too far close behind him. Another solid performance from Mazraoui. Again, I say this pretty much every time I talk about Mazraoui, and I'm not the only one. You can see whenever anyone talks about him, it's in glowing terms. One of our biggest bargains for some time so far. Fingers crossed he stays fit. I know that was a concern at Bayern Munich, and I said before that I think one of the only reasons we got him so cheap was because I was going to say it was because of the injuries, but I think there was a little bit of a political thing that had gone on, or something he'd said before. I can't remember exactly what it was about now, and I know that had ruffled some feathers at Bayern too, so there may have been something in that as well. But their loss has been our gain, and he's been really, really good for us this season, and another solid performance from him in another unfamiliar position. A player now who was played right back, left back, now centre back today, and he's played number 10. Before the season's out, he may have played in every position, and why not try him at number 9? Maybe that's a position we've been struggling in this season. He seems to be able to do almost anything else. De Ligt, I thought was reasonably solid. I'm giving him a 6. I don't feel like there's too much to say. I know he was caught out on one occasion when he sort of pressed up the pitch. But that leads on to Johnny Evans, who was caught out on a couple of occasions and just generally looked really, really off the pace. I haven't seen Johnny Evans struggle like that since he's come back to us, really. Maybe it was moving into a back 3. Maybe it was just one of those games. It's going to be interesting to see going forwards. We know he's not going to be a regular at centre-back when everybody's fit. We have somehow found ourselves in a position again where a lot of our centre-backs have been dropping like flies. And it was a relief to have the cover of at least Luke Shaw on the bench. Again, he's not really a centre-back. I think we were out of no Martinez, no Lindelof, no Maguire. Yoro not quite there yet to participate, but at least he'll be back in the team soon. And I definitely he'll be taking one of those other spots at the back as soon as he's fit. But yeah, it wasn't great from Johnny Evans, but he's been so good for us since we've had him back on a free transfer, and at his age too, it's hard to moan too much, and maybe it really was just one of those days at the office. Diogo Dalot, I thought, was really poor, but as for the players who did perform poorly, I think he was one who didn't adapt great to the changing system. I don't think he's been great at left back this season. I think where we can avoid it, we don't play him there. We shouldn't play him there. I think he's more effective on the right, if effective at all. And I've seen a lot of criticism aimed his way, and it's hard to argue with it too much. He's been one of our poorest players of the season, if not potentially our worst. You don't count Anthony, by the way, when you say that, because he's just out of the equation altogether at the moment. But yeah, I didn't think he offered us anything really going forwards as a threat. I know Amorim apparently favours or did favour at Sporting having one winger on their right foot and one wing back on their correct foot, and one wing back playing basically turning onto their wrong foot, and it was more inverted sort of player. But we had two doing that, and Ahmad showed he was happy to go on either foot when he set up the goal with his right foot, so that was fine. And we'll come on to Ahmad in a second. But Dalot he was cutting back far too often for me. He wasn't really penetrating that side. I saw him try to do a couple of chips with the ball and sort of beat his man, and he just didn't seem to have it in the tank to do that. And it was a shame. But I'm going to write this one off as largely down to the system. But whatever was the reason behind it, it was a poor performance. Now on to Ahmad. He was brilliant again for someone who's been playing in very much a different position to. I think most of us expected that if Ahmad was going to play, he would probably play at number 10. I don't think anyone would have ruled him out at wing back, but we didn't expect to see that, and yet he was great there. He's in a good sort of vein of form at the moment, and I feel a bit bad for him that the rest of the team's not performing so well, because I think if they were, we'd probably see even more from Ahmad. If to have those link ups with players, he's kind of got a bit of a relationship with Bruno Fernandes in recent weeks, but. Yeah, I think if it was more than that, I think if a few of them were on fire, I think it would bring even more out of Ahmad too. But the run he did to set up the goal for Rashford was fantastic. I thought he did his defensive work really well in an area of the pitch he's not super familiar with. So yeah, happy with Ahmad and a comfortable 7. Casemiro with 5. I thought, for me, a lot of what he did bad wasn't necessarily down to him having a bad game as such. I know that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but it was more so, I think the game was so fast around him. I think for him to be in a 2, it was like us seeing what we saw last season with Casemiro, the worst of him. It just doesn't suit him. For me, Casemiro needs to be in the base of a 3-man midfield, ideally, and not being asked to cover a certain position and role. And be your anchor man and have runners around him. I think he could still contribute massively to a team that really wanted that sort of that point in the middle of the park. You couldn't play in any sort of 3 because it depended on the 2 in front of him and how they're asked to play. Because if you leave him to explode as a 1, that's a recipe for disaster as well. But the intensity with which that game was played, it just really didn't suit him. He's been a lot better this season than last. I thought, apart from the Liverpool game, he's been quite solid. Alongside, on our next one, Christian Eriksen, who I've given it a 6 to. I thought Eriksen's coming for quite a bit of stick too, and I think other people would have him down there on a 5 or a 4. But I think he's been tarred by, or marred. He's right in people's eyes has been marred by his coupling with Casemiro in the middle of the park. The 2 of them together, it was poor. It was a poor performance. But I think out of the 2, I did think Eriksen did all right individually. I thought he looked tidy. He looked quite neat on the ball. It wasn't as, you want more creativity. You need him to probe more because that's his job of the 2 in that midfield, and they didn't impact the game. So I think as a 2, I'd maybe even go down like less than that and give them a 4. As a unit, they were quite ineffective. But individually, I don't think either were that bad. Like I say, giving Casemiro a 5 just because it was below par from him, but I don't think it was completely his fault. I don't think the system suits him, and that could be worrying going forwards. Maybe against teams that don't press as much as Ipswich, it won't be too much of an issue. And Eriksen, I thought, in and of himself, he was okay, but together they didn't really complement each other in this game, and they didn't bring the best out of each other, and it was a big weakness of our team in midfield. Bruno a 6. I think he could have. Bruno was more of a 6.5 compared to some of the other players I've given a 6. He was better than Eriksen. I think he was probably. It's hard to compare them, but I gave De Ligt a 6.2, and I think Bruno was still up a notch. It was more, like I say, more of a 6.5, but I didn't feel like I could give him a 7 either. I've thought at times he didn't make the best decisions. He was unlucky with the free kick attempts. I thought a bit of frustration as the game went on crept into his game, which was natural, and you would want a little bit more out of him. I think he hurried stuff as the game went on at times too. It worked for us when he dropped back into midfield, sort of deeper role towards the end when we were trying to get a winner. But yeah, you always want to see a bit more from Bruno, but he set himself such high standards, that he probably does get, measured against a much higher marker than a lot of the other players in the team. Garnacho a 5, it could have been a 4, but I felt like, again, like Casemiro, it wasn't so much that he himself played badly. I just think he struggled with the system, struggled with what he was asked to do, but I think he did his best. It wasn't like I thought, oh, he's playing there and he's not even, he doesn't fancy it. I think he really tried to make the most of it, and there were a couple of times he should have really got away when he looked like he was in behind and he struggled to find the extra gear, which worried me a little bit because I remember watching him in the under-21s and he just seemed like lightning. Even you thought if he's going to get into the first team and defenders are going to struggle with him, and while he is really quick, he's not turned out to be as quick at this level as I thought he looked at the under-21s, which is normal. It's hard to compare until you see players at this level. So yeah, I wanted a bit more from Garnacho, but again, at his age and the experiences that he's had, if he can eventually use them more positively, he's going to be some player, because he's had a really tough sort of introduction into the first team, and was it 30 consecutive games last year or more potentially, for someone of his age. Was he still 20 at the moment? I think he's been really good for us, and he gets a lot of stick. Like, for me, a crazy amount of stick for someone of his age doing what he's done for us already. It's mad. So yeah, it was a poor performance from him. I don't know where his future lies in this team. We'll come on to positioning afterwards to probably revisit what we've said a little bit. But yeah, 5 for Garnacho. Rashford a 6. I thought he started off brilliantly with the goal. I didn't think he started off brilliantly. He did start off brilliantly. And then as the game went on, he just seemed to, like... I heard earlier it was 13 touches he had in the entire game, which blew my mind a little bit. Not so much because... Not that I watched him and thought he had more, but you just assume players will have had more than that. And... at half time it would have been a 7. He got the goal, and I thought there was some promise there in terms of, I thought he was willing, and it just seemed to fade until he got substituted. I think he was frustrated with the lack of service, which was a theme which sadly carried on from Erik ten Hag's reign. But what I will say, just to take a little detour for a moment, it's not something I plan to cover later on in the video, but one thing that we do have now in my eyes, which is very different to when Erik ten Hag was there, is, I've said before with ten Hag's Man United, I couldn't tell you what a goal, a Ten Hag goal would look like, really. But I think the first goal we scored today will be a staple of our play under Ruben Amorim. I think that is one of the goals that you will see scored quite often. The wing back getting him, pulling the ball back, and it'll either be our number 9 or number 10 getting on the end of that. We've just got to find ways to do that more often. What I would say is you need more than just your one wing back capable of doing that, because Dalot is not doing that. He's not going to do that on the other side, not a left wing back in particular. If he was more of an Ashley Young and you cut in and putting those really good balls into the box, then maybe, he might create chances in a different way and give us a different form of attack. But for me, I want someone who can do what Ahmad did on the right. I need someone who can do that on the left for us too. You kind of thought maybe Garnacho would have drifted from the 10 into wide areas at times, and he would have been capable of providing that sort of threat too, and that didn't really materialise. There were 1 or 2 occasions where it looked like he might do that, one towards the end of the game too, where I think he did manage to pull one back. And I think that is going to be for us this season, struggling to score goals, I think that will probably be our most prolific route to goal. I'm hoping when I say that, I'm not just talking about 5 or 6 goals by the end of the season, but we've scored maybe 10 to 15 goals across the team in that particular way. On the bench, Luke Shaw came on after a long time out. Don't need to go into the history of that too much. That's been covered quite well with the Euros and all. 6 for sure. It was steady. He came on. He gave us a little bit more balance, I thought. It was quite a low bar from Evans' performance for sure to come on and change it, but he did all right. Ugarte, again, looks solid. Did better than Casemiro when he was on the pitch, but nothing super stand out. He didn't sort of swing the tide in our favour, but maybe stop the rot a little bit. Xerxes 5 and Højlund 5, for both of them came on to a different role, and I'll talk about them to a little bit more when we come on to looking ahead to the Bodo Glimt game afterwards. And 6 from Mount, who I know was only on for a few minutes. It just felt really hard to judge him either way, to knock him down. I think in football, when 6 is that kind of like your average. You know, other people might see that as a 5, but for me, your base is a 6. And I don't think he did anything to shift it either way and didn't have time for really that to change much. If it was in the newspaper, you'd probably see a non-applicable next to him. Okay, so yeah, that was the ratings. Let's do Amorim. Let's do the manager while we're here too. Ruben Amorim, I definitely give him an 8. I know we haven't come away with a win, but I felt that the changes he made in the game made a lot of sense. I would have probably knocked him down for the starting lineup because of what we know about the players and how that might have played out beforehand. If it wasn't for the fact that he explained that completely fairly, that the amount of time he had to train with the players post the international break, they were coming back at different times. He tried to lean on the players he'd had more time with. It made sense, really. You know, he was in a very difficult position going into this game. So I think he did the best with what he had. He made changes that I couldn't really disagree with his changes. I thought they were the right ones to do. He tried to be positive to win the game by dropping Bruno into midfield and bringing in more attackers and having Xerxes and Horden both on the pitch at the same time. So yeah, it was... I can't really knock him for what he tried to do and with the circumstances that he was working in for this match. So I thought it was a solid start for him, and it was just a shame we couldn't get 3 points for him too. Although Andre Onana did make sure that he didn't come away from that game with a defeat. Now, my next point, and one of the things that stood out to me from this game, were I think one of the things that's really going to make or break the rest of this season for Ruben Amorim. Not his time going forwards, because, you know, next season's going to be a different kettle of fish, but from getting the most out of this season, I think it'll be about getting players in the right positions, and that's what he's going to have to figure out. I don't see us spending money in January, or any significant money. Maybe there'll be like loans involved, but he's still getting the quality of player that can positively impact this team. That's a big ask. You've seen a few names bounded about. Moani from Paris Saint-Germain, for example, but I'm looking at that going, well, the reason that he might come on loan to us is because he's not really hit the ground running there. And someone who's not hit the ground running in Ligue 1, are they going to do that in the Premier League? We've already got misfiring strikers. Is that what we want? Again, I've not followed PSG this season, so I don't really know his specific circumstances. Anyone who's a bit more enlightened than me, please let me know in the comments below. And yeah, it'd be good to know if you think that he might be able to do a job for us going into the next part of the season. But loans aside, Amorim's got to work with what he has. And yeah, and that's going to come down to finding out what works and what doesn't work. And I think today we found a couple of examples of what doesn't work. So going back to before, Johnny Evans in a 3-man defence, that doesn't look like it worked. It's going to work anyway. And even within that 3-man defence, it's then finding the right positions for players. It was interesting, one of the things that did, Mazraoui was positive there, you know, on the right of the 3, but I think a lot of us would like to see him further up the pitch, potentially going forwards. Another one for me, which we talked about before, was Garnacho. I'm not sure. I wouldn't write it off just yet in that number 10 role, but as good as Ahmed did at wing back, I wouldn't mind flipping the two of those players and seeing Garnacho as the right wing back. He is going to have to do more defensive work than perhaps we associate him with, but I think he's capable. I mean, I've seen it thrown at Garnacho that he doesn't track back, but he does. Maybe not consistently enough. Maybe that's the problem. If you go back and watch our games, there are plenty of times you'll see Garnacho going the other way and getting a tackle in, but I don't think he does it enough. I think that's the problem there. Maybe it would do his all-round game. You know, it'd be more positive if he spent some time playing wing back and having to have those defensive duties just to give him a better understanding of the game overall. But that is going to be a big marker. Rashford, where's he going to play going forwards? You know, I think I'm not alone in saying that I don't see him as a number 9, although I think he's getting into Martial territory now, whereby even though I don't see him as a 9, I'm not sure he's got the same explosiveness he once had to be a wide player still. And maybe this is the time in his career where he does need to transform into a number 9. And to do that, he's going to need significant game time there and practice to do that. But when you're in a season, or playing for a Manchester United team who are in a season where they're not scoring many goals, you're not going to get the leeway to find your feet doing that. And it's weird because I'm talking almost as if he's a new signing and not somebody who's played quite a few games for us as a number 9 before. And he can do it, but he's just not prolific in that position. And can you suddenly learn that? I think he needs to. If we're not going to play with wingers too, can he excel behind a striker? Maybe he can. And that's the thing, is Rashford going to get a run out there? So there's a lot of trial and error that Amorim's going to have to do to find out if people work in particular places. Even when it comes to next summer, I don't think we're going to have loads of money to spend. And if we're talking about making one or two marquee signings, talking about 50, 60 million pound signings as opposed to multiple 20 million pound signings, well, he's really going to be limited what he can change in his team in the transfer market. So he's going to have to shuffle people around and work things out. And then there's another danger for me of doing that, and that is what I'm going to call the Scott McTominay effect. And when Jose Mourinho came into Manchester United and needed somebody in that profile in defensive midfield, and he was looking through the team thinking, who can I use, who can bolster my midfield, he decided to go with McTominay. And I remember at the time, I think we had Matic 2, and you think, is McTominay going to be Matic 2.0? He's got the physique. He looked at that point in time like, assured enough on the ball. If he didn't excel on the ball, he looked composed enough, and you thought he's maybe someone, if Mourinho's picked him out, maybe he's someone who can grow into that role. As we find out as the years go on, and obviously for people who knew about him being a striker in the academy, and then he had a massive growth spurt and sort of dropped back, which I'm not sure they necessarily complement each other. Maybe if he carried on being a striker and had that growth spurt too, that could have worked out really well for him. But in a similar point though, what we did learn over the years was that McTominay really is an attacking midfielder. And he might have lost, in my eyes, and the reason I say the danger of playing players out of position, I think McTominay might well have lost about 4 or 5 years as a first-team player at a club, whether it was Man United or not, but as a player playing in his best position. I think he lost out on that. I think he was meant to be behind a striker, crashing the box. A number 10, I think he would be playing in the number 10 role. Yeah, he would be technically, but he'd be more of a Fellaini in what he used to do at Everton. I think there would have been a club out there for him. And whether that was United or not, I think there would have been a team who could have utilised that trait. I know this is a bit stereotypical, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense. I think it would have been a positive, but I remember Burnley with, was it Chris Wood and Ashley Barnes, I believe, up front for them, caused havoc and kept them up in the league. And I could have seen McTominay as a sort of second striker in that team and being a massive upgrade and doing really good things in that sort of system or structure. And yeah, he's not going to moan. He played in midfield for Man United for years. But I think he took a lot more stick than he needed to because of where he ended up playing. And I think this is a danger for players. And I think another person who, I popped this on a post on Blue Sky about Diogo Dalot, and just saying that I think he could be a victim of having been an inverted fullback. Because I'm not seeing him at the moment as being an explosive wing-back option for us, even at in his preferred side. I think big games he'll get more space than others, but no, not being. It worries me that he's played as an inverted fullback so much playing in midfield that he has lost a bit of what maybe became natural in previously as a fullback. And I don't see him as a centre midfielder either. And I think he might have left him in no man's land a little bit. And for every player, we've seen other managers in the past at different clubs. I think Pep's been known for it before, of shifting a player into an unfamiliar position and getting the most out of them. I think he's kind of doing it with Rico Lewis a little bit at the moment too. And it can work for some players, but for others, I think you then become known as that type of player and you don't come back from it. I think Ashley Young ended up as a fullback and he did quite well as a fullback. Maybe he lost some explosiveness going forward, but there was no coming back once he was in that position. And it was the same for Antonio Valencia too. Could he have still done a job as a winger? I don't know, but once he became a fullback, that's where he stayed. It might work for some players, but once you move, sometimes it can be hard to get back to where you do. And this, for me, is a concern for Garnacho, massively. I think if Amorim decides that number 10 is where he's going to be, I worry that he's not going to be able to do that well and find consistency there. As much as he's played there, I think it's going to be really hit and miss, and the fans are going to get on his back. And it's not necessarily going to be his fault, because he will be being played out of position, and then it's going to affect his value, it's going to affect his confidence, and he could end up wasting some of his best years. I don't want to see Garnacho go, but I think if we're looking at a certain profile of players and we're going to back Amorim, that's a big decision for the club and the manager. Yes, they're great. They're really good players with potential to be really, really good players, or world-class players maybe. But if they're not going to get played in their preferred positions, are they going to lose some of their edge? We see where even Real Madrid at the moment have that quandary really with Vinicius and Mbappe. If one of those guys plays out of position too much and they don't hit the heights that they've hit before, just because somebody technically can play a position and have played there doesn't mean it's their position where they excel. So it will be interesting to see how Amorim approaches that going forwards. And talking about going forwards, what do we want to see against Bodo Glimt on Thursday? For me, if he's still up for experimenting, I definitely want to see Højlund and Xerxes start together. I think I'd probably go with Mason Mount behind the striker. I think it's more realistic that Bruno plays again, because Bruno always plays. And we do need the win at the moment, so you still want to play a strong team. So on the balance of that, even though I kind of want to see the Xerxes Højlund experiment, I know a lot of you out there don't like Xerxes, so I'm still holding out hope at the moment. But I think probably it makes more sense to then have Mount and Bruno behind Højlund. I think I'd like to see that. And then in the middle, it's difficult in centre midfield because I don't know how fit people are. So I think Ugai has to come in. It'd be good to see Manu get some minutes, but whether he can play the full game, I don't know. If he's fit enough, I'd like to see Manu start, and maybe comes off around 60 minutes or so. But it'd be good to see the two of them together. But I don't want it to be rushed back at the same time either. The wing back roles, Ahmed played really well, but this is tricky. I think he needs to try somebody else at left wing back. Personally, I keep going on about this, and it's probably not going to happen because he would have been on the bench, I thought, in this game. But Harry Amas, just try him. Just try him at left wing back and see how that works out. Just give it a go. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't matter. Right wing back, it depends on who's fit at the back, because Mazraoui could potentially move to one of the wing back roles for this game. We haven't got too many options because of the injuries at centre back. Is Yoro going to be fit enough to play a part? Because we haven't got too many options. I don't know if Shaw's going to be fit enough to start either. So we could very well end up with the same back three that started the last game, just based on who's fit enough to play there. Unless he experiments a bit more and maybe tries Dalab in the back three. I think that's really up in the air, who plays in the wing back roles, dependent upon fitness of the centre backs at the moment, and whether again he needs to move, keep Mazraoui in that back three. And goalkeeping's interesting too. I haven't thought about this until literally right now, but I was just going to chuck Onana back in goal. I don't know if Amorim's the kind of manager who likes to have a cup goalkeeper or not. So that's going to be interesting to see if by India comes in and he tries out one of his other goalkeepers, or Heaton, if he's fit at the moment, comes in and plays. So that's something to see. I always thought Ten Hag underutilised his backup goalkeepers, and I thought if ever we do, end up having, if we are without Onana for any sort of extended period of time, he's understood he's going to be poorly prepped and not have that actual game experience, regardless of what you do in training. So I'm curious to see who he does use in goal. I think maybe for stability's sake and while he's getting the team to know his patterns, he'd probably stick with Onana, but going forwards, maybe that'll change.